This is a response to a member of our Patreon community, Del Seibold. My apologies if I've got the pronunciation wrong. I'm happy to answer this question from Del because it's important, and I'm quite sure that many of you will be interested. Here's the question. In a socialist economy based on worker co-ops, it is reasonable to assume that some worker co-ops will be more successful than others for reasons of skill, access to resources, good luck, any number of reasons. And so the question that bothers Del, and rightly so, is would that mean that some worker co-ops reward their members generously with high incomes and others with low incomes? Presumably in a socialist economy, this is a problem, and that's of course one of the reasons why a socialist economy attracts people, because it's a problem for them. And so Del wonders, how do you deal with this if you don't want inequality to either diminish or undermine a socialist economy? So besides saying to Del, good question, good thinking, let me try to respond. The first thing is to understand that throughout human history, long before there was capitalism or socialism, human beings worried about these kinds of questions. Human beings understood. And by the way, how do we know this? Aristotle and Plato 5,000 years ago in ancient Greece talked about it, and we have the record, so we know. But in many other societies, there are likewise evidences that extreme differences in wealth and income, or often not even extreme by modern standards, but modest differences, were thought to, and these are the words of Plato and Aristotle, threaten social cohesion. Another way to say that is undermine community, undermine the glue that holds people together in town, in village, and in society as a whole, and therefore had to be dealt with. And there were ingenious methods. The one I like to remind people of is the idea of jubilee, that has many forms and existed in many cultures, where every few years, sometimes as short periods as every 5 years, sometimes as long as every 50 years, there would be a reshuffling of everybody's resources so that nobody could become rich for all that long before the resources, the land, the tools, the animals were reshuffled and the rich became not so rich and the not so rich became rich, etc., to make it less of a hardening of differences, especially across the decades or across the generations. So there's nothing new here. But it doesn't mean it isn't an urgent problem. My answer would be the following. In a socialist society, one of the ways you deal with inequality is you change from private consumption to collective consumption. What do I mean? Instead of everybody having a private park or going for a picnic to a private park, which can charge money and thereby exclude people, you have what indeed many American cities and towns have, a public park, or maybe a dozen, where people can go no matter how much income they have or don't have, no matter how much wealth they own or don't, and can have a picnic with their children and their friends and their pets whenever they want to. It's a way of collectively consuming a meadow, a parkland. Well, now suppose, as socialists have always been interested in, you use the same principle for a whole host of other kinds of consumption. Housing is provided as a collective good. You draw lots or straws for which apartment you get. You can appeal and you can try again and get a different apartment. You will get an apartment according to how many children you have or how many rooms you need or what you need an apartment for, which can change, etc. And suppose transportation were provided as a public good. Kansas City recently decided to charge nothing for all of their public transportation. It becomes thereby a collectively consumed good, not a privately consumed good. Transportation, health care, housing, and how about this, which exists in a number of countries? Leisure, vacation resorts that everybody has access to on a schedule that you can choose, etc., etc. All kinds of things can be done that way, and that means there's less left for the unpleasantness, let's call it, of people having different capacities to pay for them. Second, you can reward people not just with money when they work hard, but with leisure. It's something we ought to have done long ago. You become more productive, you and your co-workers in your enterprise. Okay, your workday is reduced by an hour, or a half hour, or an hour and a half, or a day of the week. You are rewarded in a personal way, but not with money, with time. And as you get older, you understand that it's the time that is the more valuable. Here's another way. You pay people extra for their extra success, whatever its causes, but you don't pay them in the conventional way by putting more cash into their personal envelope. No, you put more cash into the collective envelope of that workplace. And it is put together with other people who have this kind of an extra, because they're extra skilled, or they work harder, or they've been lucky, or whatever the usual combination is. It goes into a fund for the benefit of the community. But it's a fund that will have a little plaque on it saying, this playground, this swimming pond, this local amenity was provided by the skilled extra work of these workers in this enterprise, in this co-op. In other words, yeah, you're rewarded, but your reward is linked to you personally, yes, but also to you as a benefactor of the larger community. You know, in capitalism, we let very rich people decide whether or not they want to give a benefit to the community, and then we put their name all over it, don't we? This is a socialist alternative. It's collective, it's social, it's much more generically organized, little less left to the voluntary decision of the rich individual, and more something we collectively impose on ourselves. There are other ways, but have no fear. In a socialist economy that is conscious and committed to not allowing extremes of unequal wealth to develop, they have many, many weapons. And I haven't even gone into redistributive divisions of property, different kinds of tax systems, different kinds of public spending. Those too are available. And in a socialist society built on and committed to values of collective solidarity, it should be much easier than it has been in capitalism to get the commitments of hardworking people to share and to live in a community that shares and that takes care of one another. So I'm hopeful that these kinds of problems that you quite rightly raise will find their solutions in a way that's consistent with socialist values. Thank you for your question, and of course, as usual, our thanks to the entire supportive Patreon community.